So a couple months ago, you had this crazy idea and you signed up for the Dopey challenge and you thought, I need something to make myself get out there and run more. And it was so exciting because you actually got registered, which is an endorphin rush on its own because it's really difficult to get registered. And then you sat in the afterglow and thought, I'll have to start training in a couple of months. And a couple of months has come, friends, and it's time to start that training. And it can be hard to get your motivation back up, and it can be hard to stick to the plan. The Dopey challenge is no joke, and it can be difficult to get that training done. So today we're talking about the determination you need to actually train for the Dopey challenge. Now, why is this important? I can tell you after having run many, many races that if you get to the start line and you're not confident in your ability to finish, it is going to be a much more difficult race. And it is definitely a mental mind game. I know when I started running my first marathon, when I was at the start line, I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I can do this. 26.2 miles, I'm not going to be able to get it done. However, I had already run 24 miles before, so I knew that really, realistically, I could run 26.2 miles, and I was going to make it through okay. However, if you haven't put that training in, you haven't put those miles in, it's going to be way more difficult of a mind game in the beginning and even throughout the race. Because if you haven't realized by now, the Dopey challenge is more mental than it is physical, and any marathon or long distance is more mental than it is physical. But we want to start preparing our mental attitude so we're in the right place, so we know we've got the training under our belt, so we can actually get it done. All right. So how do you turn your motivation into determination? The first step is you want to make sure you have a good training program. Now, there's lots of different training programs out there. I'm going to link mine below. My training program is specifically designed for people who are already ready to run a half marathon. So that is, I could go out tomorrow and run a half marathon without too much difficulty. If you're starting at a different level, I definitely recommend you check out other training plans. The Jeff Galloway method is super effective, and a lot of people have used it in the Run Disney community. So check that one out, but you want to make sure that you find a training program that is starting at an appropriate level for where you are right now and finishing at the level that you want to, which if it's Dopey, that's a 5K, 10K, half, and full marathon. So you want to make sure that your training program is going to get you to the distance that you want to get to. Now, I highly recommend that you post that training program somewhere where you're going to see it regularly. So mine is in my office, which is also where I keep my headphones, and I also keep my watch and stuff. So as I'm grabbing everything else, I can just look up and see what are my miles that I need to do that day. The other thing is that if it's posted somewhere where you can see it on paper, then you can mark it off and you get credit for doing that run. Now, for some people, logging it on their watch counts enough for them. Whatever gives you the credit and the validation that, yes, I actually did it, do that. Whatever is going to help motivate you. Again, we're working on the mental aspect here. So whatever is going to help motivate you and get you across that finish line, go ahead and do that. For me, I'm a pen and paper person. So being able to mark it off and say, yes, I did those miles is really motivational. Now, the second step is you have to stick to the training plan. And that can be very, very difficult at the beginning. And it can also be very, very difficult as you're getting to those longer runs. So in the beginning, you're ramping up your miles. Maybe you're increasing your pace. Maybe you're trying to increase your distance. And it's hard. It feels like a slog. And some runs have definitely felt like a slog. But sometimes you have to get through the slog just to get those miles in order to get the good run that's going to come later. Every day is going to be different, and every day your body might feel different. So make sure that you do what your body needs to do, but keep running or run walking, depending on what program you're using. Stick to your training program and make sure you get those miles on your legs so you're in the right place to progress your training to get to your goal. Which leads to step number 3. That is particularly important when you're talking about something like a Dopey challenge, which is multiple runs, multiple days in a row. You need to make sure you get in all your runs. Now, this can be a little difficult with scheduling if you're traveling or if it's summer right now and people have vacations scheduled and things like that. You got to figure it out, and you don't want to skip a run. I'm not saying that you should run in unsafe conditions. If you're not able to run because the heat index is too high, in the winter, if you're not able to run because it's not safe conditions outside, find a way to get on a treadmill and get those miles in some other way. But it's really important to make sure that you get each and every run in, especially when it's the Dopey challenge and there's multiple runs, multiple days in a row. And the last tip I'm going to recommend is a hotly debated topic online, and that's how long should your longest run be? Now, everybody has an opinion on this, and this is just my opinion. There is no research that backs up you have to do this or you have to do that. What I can tell you is when you're standing at the start line of a marathon, if you do not have a really long run, a 20 to 24 mile run underneath your belt, it is going to be a psychological game to be even able to start that race. I feel for myself, and what I recommend for others is to make sure that you have a really long run. Again, 20 to 24 miles at least once under your belt, so you feel confident in your ability to be able to complete that marathon. And here's another thing that I've seen online. If you don't get that long run in, you haven't really fully tested your gear. So I was reading online and there was someone who had got some new socks, but had never done a super long run in them. And he ended up getting blisters during the marathon. So that's really, really challenging, obviously really, really painful, and gonna make it difficult for you to be able to complete that race. So I really cannot recommend enough that you get your long run in, that you do it in the gear you're going to be running in, at least the socks and the shoes. If nothing else, make sure you have your hydration and your nutrition in place as well. Those should always be tested before race day. I do not recommend doing anything new on race day that you haven't used before. I know some people will rely on what's on course in order to have hydration and nutrition. If that's you, then make sure you know what is going to be on course, and definitely recommend that you train with that, because you don't want to be in the middle of the race and not be properly hydrated or not have the nutrition that you need to be able to finish. Because let me tell you, I got out there on my marathon, and in mile 16, my thighs were burning so bad that I did not know if I was going to be able to finish. Now, I had trained with my gear. I had trained with my hydration and nutrition. However, I live in Washington State. My long runs were during the winter, and I was not used to the Florida heat and the Florida humidity. So what happened was that I did not have enough salt. And I had not trained with salt because that's not a problem where I live in Washington. However, it's something I'm looking forward to training with in Dopey, because I'm going to need it when I actually get out to Florida. So that's something to consider too. If your long run is going to be in the winter and you live somewhere where it's cooler, make sure that you take that into consideration. In general, Florida in January is going to be warmer than where you live, and it's also going to be more humid. So you want to make sure you take that into account on your race. And the last tip I'm going to recommend is something to consider for my runners who run early in the morning, which is fantastic because obviously Dopey happens early in the morning. But I want you to think about your caffeine intake before the race. This is particularly important if you're used to running in the morning, getting home early enough to have your coffee or tea or whatever your caffeine choice of the morning is. But if you're in the middle of a marathon and that's your usual time to have a cup of coffee and you don't have anything, it can definitely cause a headache. So make sure you're thinking about caffeine intake as well if you're going to have it before the race, if you're going to take something during the race, and make sure you've tested that, because again, it is really important that there's nothing new on race day. Your body is used to the distance, you know how to wear your gear, you've tested your hydration and nutrition, and there's not going to be any new changes that are coming. Now, if you've gotten to the end of this video and you think, wow, that sounds like a really cool thing to do, and you've not yet signed up for the Dopey, then I'm going to recommend you check out this video over here on how to get registered for the next Dopey challenge.